Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about two brand new makeup items that I'm feeling really excited about. So the first one is a new eyeshadow palette from Byredo, which is called Mineralscapes. And this has 18 different shades in it. And I am finding each of these shades to be so beautiful that I am really thinking that I'm going to be using this primarily just as a one and done palette, where I just use one of these shadows on my eyes at a time to coordinate with either my clothing look or what I am feeling at the time. And so I thought that that's how I would demonstrate this for you today. So what I have done is put each of these shadows on my eyes individually and coordinate that with a little bit of extra makeup so that it would be like something that I would be wearing in the real world. So I will be showing you that. And then the other product that I have is a new lip liner from Mob Beauty, and it is called M1990. And the head of Mob Beauty was associated with MAC in its early days, and this is designed to be exactly the same shade as the original MAC Spice lip liner that was really popular throughout the 1990s. And I am pretty convinced that this is the same shade that was so popular back in those early days. And so for this video, I have swatched this against a bunch of other lip liners and lipsticks and blushes, and I have included in this the current MAC Spice lip liner. So hopefully you will get a good sense of what exact color this is and whether or not it's similar to anything else that you might have in your collection. But after having tried this for a while, I have continued to be pretty excited about it, and I think I'm going to get a whole lot of wear out of this now. So I wanted to show you this in detail. And I did shoot all of the footage of these products on a day when I had really good natural light, a little better than the light that I have today. And so hopefully these colors will be a really good representation of what they actually do look like in the real world. So first, a little bit of information about me. I'm 59 years old, which means that I was 26 in 1990, and I have dry and sensitive skin. And I have never had any kind of cosmetic procedures like injections or surgery or really anything else. And I also don't use any filters or photoshopping on my channel. And so my goal is to see if I can find makeup and skincare products that can help me to look a little bit fresher and maybe even a little bit younger. And over the past 3 years, I've tried more than 1,000 makeup products, and so I do have a pretty good sense of comparison for everything new that I try. And one thing that I have found out is that there are certain ingredients that always do irritate my sensitive skin, and I know that these ingredients tend to be irritating for many other people as well, so I just don't talk about products with those ingredients on this channel. So let's talk first about this Byredo palette. So the reason that I was really attracted to this palette is because I really thought that it would be a really good one and done palette, and also because I thought that these colors were soft enough and not too flamboyant, but also interesting enough that they would work well with my complexion and that they would also serve nicely as one and done eyeshadows. And I think that actually has turned out to be the case. So if I look at these colors, I do think that all of these are really gorgeous and that they do coordinate really well with the clothing that I tend to wear. And when I have put them on my eyes, I do think that they have worked really, really well. There's just a very slight amount of shimmer in some of these, but it's not too glitzy. It doesn't look glittery. And I think that the colors themselves are really at the same time, they're kind of muted, but I think that they're also really very special colors, and when I put them on, they do look really nice. So of course you can take any palette and you can choose a variety of different colors and you can create a nice shadow look that takes a while to put on and that has a variety of colors. But I really feel like with this palette, when I have used it, I feel like if I spend just a really minimal amount of time, like 30 seconds, putting on each eye and then blending it in, I feel like the looks that I have gotten from this have been just as beautiful as any of the other ones that I have seen. And that's one thing that I am really looking for, is makeup that can really work for me fast and that doesn't take a lot of time to put on, but that looks really special. And I feel like this particular palette is really qualifying for that. So even though this was a really expensive product for me to buy, I'm hoping that I can at least get some good use out of it over time. And I do think that this is something that I'm probably going to feel inclined to not put away and only take it out once in a while, but to actually leave it out and to use it on a regular basis just when I want to throw on something in a hurry. And then another thing I really think is that right now having really simple eyeshadow looks is very much on trend. So I think that, in a lot of cases, I'm thinking particularly of when Merit introduced those solo shadows, and they talked about how these were more like 1990s eyeshadow looks. And when I look back at the 1990s and thought about my own experiences back then, I do think it was the case that if I was going to put on eyeshadow, which I think I did most days when I was going to work, that I would just pick one color, put on a little bit with the brush, and then that was it. And this idea of using a variety of different eyeshadows in order to, for instance, make your eyes look farther apart or to make your eyes look less hooded, that was really not something that I think was much of a trend, or at least it was something that I had never heard of back in the 1990s. I think that there was not as much of an emphasis back then on the idea of taking makeup and to make your features look like something else, like some kind of idealized Kardashian type of person. And instead it was really just to bring out your own features and to look more individual. And that is something that I'm also becoming much more attracted to these days, is the idea of just using makeup to make myself look prettier, but more like myself and less like someone else. And so I think that's another reason that I'm really happy about this particular one shadow eyeshadow trend, because I think that if you pick the right shadows, your eyes can look really beautiful and it can really bring them out a lot more. But it's not so much to try to make up for supposed flaws in your face, and I don't feel like most of us have flaws that we need to be compensating for that much anyway. And the other good thing that I like about this palette is that I really feel like these colors are ones that I can wear every day, either for evening looks or for day looks. They don't look too glittery. They're not really bright colors. I feel like regardless of your complexion, you could probably use these more strongly, because they do have a lot of pigment in them, but I feel like I can sheer them out so that they just give me a bit of a color and that they're all really attractive. So I don't feel like they're really boring, and I do think that those Merit shadows were a little bit on the boring side, but I don't feel like they're so dramatic or so memorable or so highly pigmented or such bright colors that I really can't wear them on a regular basis. So for my particular desired makeup style, I've been really kind of excited about this palette. Now, it certainly is the case that in the photos that they have on their website, the colors are much more dramatic, and they're much more what we call editorial type of eye looks, and that's fine, but there is no reason that you need to use them in that way. They can certainly be used in a much more restrained way. And today for this look, and I'll talk about this and show you me putting it on later on, I just really picked one color, which was a light blue color, and I put it on my lids, and then I took another color, which is a dark blue color, and I just used that as an eyeliner. And when I felt like when I did that, I didn't even really have to use mascara in order to give my eyes a fairly focused look, but it certainly was easy, and it certainly seems like, I feel like it's something that I can wear anywhere. I don't need to restrict it to a certain time of day or feel like I'm out of place. So what I did for my video footage is I shot myself putting on one of these shadows on one of my eyes at a time, and then I just added a little bit of concealer and a little bit of powder and some blush or bronzer just to give myself a little bit of color, and eyebrow pencil, and then either this Mob Beauty lip liner or another lipstick or lip liner that I think is a fairly similar color. And I did this 9 times so that you could see each color on one of my eyes, and you can see it in the context of a little bit of a more general basic makeup look. Now, I didn't put on any mascara because taking off my mascara 9 times in one day, that seemed like a little bit much, but I hope that you can get a good sense of what these colors will look like in a one and done look. So I thought that what I would do is just go ahead and talk about the Byredo palette and then talk about the Ma Beauty Lip Liner. And while I'm doing that, then I will put in all of the footage of me putting on all of these different eyeshadows. And then toward the end of the video, I'll show you some swatches of the Ma Beauty product in comparison to some other lip liners and lipsticks. So let's talk first about Byredo. So this is a company that I have never purchased anything from before, and it is a very, very high-end company. It was started in 2006 by a man named Ben Gorham. He had a degree in fine arts, but then he decided that he was more interested in starting a perfume company. He started out by selling perfumes, but then expanded into a variety of other products, including some makeup products of different kinds, home products, and some leather goods. So he grew up mostly in Sweden. His mother was from India and his father was from Canada. And he did spend some time in Canada and the US, and he studied in both of those places. And my understanding is that the name Byredo means redolence, which is the quality of smelling or encountering something that makes you think of something else. So that seems to be the whole theme for this whole company. And what it says on the website is that the goal of the company is to translate memories and emotions into products and experiences. So Byredo was purchased in 2022 by a Spanish cosmetics company called Puig. And Puig is a company that also owns Charlotte Tilbury. They also own Paco Rabanne, which is now sold at Ulta in terms of their cosmetics line, and then they have fragrances. And then they also have Carolyn Herrera, Jean Paul Gaultier, and Nina Ricci. And in early 2024, the CEO of Byredo handed over the management of the company to Puig and left the company. So it will be interesting to see what happens to Byredo in the coming years. I think that if we look at, for instance, Charlotte Tilbury, I think that we can probably expect to be hearing a lot more from this brand and to think that they're going to be a lot more high profile as time goes on fairly quickly. So when I was looking at this palette, this is really the first time that I spent very much time looking at the Byredo website. They do have a variety of mostly color cosmetics on the website. So they have some other eye products, they have some lip products, some cheek products. Now this is a fragrance house, and so really most of the products that they are selling do have fragrance in them, and so that would make them a no-go product for me. So I didn't rush out and buy a whole lot of products from them. Now they do have a number of other eyeshadow palettes that are like quints. They have 5 different shades in them, and they have a bunch of different color stories, and I feel like those would also probably be okay for me in terms of the ingredients. So I'm a little bit interested in trying at least one of those now that I've decided that I really like this particular palette, but I am not sure why I haven't heard more people talking about that. So I think I need to read a few more reviews of those and then decide if I want to pick up one of those. But I do really like this particular palette. And for some of those other palettes, they are encouraging people to actually apply them with their fingers. I don't see anything on the Mineralscapes palette that says that you should apply it with your fingers, but I did try that, and I do think it works fairly well for application with my fingers. So I think that that's may actually be a preferred means of applying this. And now that I have realized from Khaki Reviews Beauty that I can just take a piece of Scotch tape and remove the top layer if it gets some hard pan on it, then I am a little bit more inclined to put it on with my fingers. But for this particular set of video footage, I'm just using a brush with a really dense and short bristles that I think is operating a little bit like my fingers when I put it on. And those palettes actually come in a metal container, and it is like a clamshell, but it says that it's supposed to look like a raindrop. Now last year, Byredo came out with a palette that was very similar to this one in terms of the size and the price and the kind of a big promotion about the palette. And that one was called Remembrance, and that one was much more of like a peach type of a color story, and it had a lot more colors in it that looked like they were pretty like glittery or shimmery. So I don't know that that palette would have been one that I would have gotten as much use out of as I'm anticipating getting out of this palette. But it does look like it was pretty, and it did get really, really good reviews. So maybe I really missed out on deciding not to buy that one at the time. So as for the Mineralscapes palette, this is $115, and it was made in Italy, and it again has 18 shades. And my experience has been recently that there have been several palettes that I have been really, really impressed with of powder eyeshadows that are from Italy, and so I think that they have some kind of real secret for making eyeshadows that are really, really wearable, that are soft enough that you can put on with your fingers, and that look really pretty, and that are kind of pleasant to use, and they create really nice and wearable eyeshadow looks, and then I don't need to worry too much about messing them up. So in this case, the eyeshadows are, as I say, they're all have a little bit of a shimmer to them, but they're really not too much. There's not so much of a shine in any of them that I don't feel like there's something that I can wear on an everyday basis. But I do think that they're beautiful enough that it makes me really want to use them and to look forward to actually wearing them. So as for the Mineralscapes palette, this does include talc, and that could be concerning for some people, certainly. My understanding of the issues with talc is that it's because talc can be contaminated with asbestos, and if it is contaminated with asbestos, and that if you breathe it in, then this could cause lung issues, and certainly we don't want that to be happening. So with regard to talc, my understanding is that there are different grades of talc, and that the ones that are of higher grades are more likely to be free of the asbestos, and I would hope that for an eyeshadow palette like this one that they are using a really high grade of talc. And I also feel like there's been a couple of the shades in this palette where there is some fallout, and so I've been kind of careful about that. Otherwise, for me, I think that the fallout in this palette has been fine. I haven't experienced much of that. But if you're concerned about talc, then this would not be a palette to buy because it does contain that. And other than the talc, I think that the ingredient list looks really good to me. There are some synthetic colors in here, but other than that, I feel like it is really a pretty good ingredient list, and I have not had any issues with this irritating my eyes, regardless of whether or not I put down an eyeshadow primer or a concealer underneath it. Now, I do usually put down some kind of an eyelid primer underneath eyeshadows. I feel like my eyes are dry enough that it really allows the eyeshadows to stick to them better if I have something on first. So what I've mostly been using is some kind of a liquid concealer. I think that that works better because it covers over the darkness on my eyes, and they also seem to be, in some cases, much more gentle, whereas really eyelid primers often do irritate my eyes. And so recently I've been trying out this new product from Say, which is called the Say Slip Tint Concealer, and this has been working fine for me. So that's what I used in most of this footage. I think there's a few of those looks that I forgot to put this on. And this eyeshadow palette actually works pretty well for me, regardless of whether I put down a primer. But I do feel like that eyeshadows in general, and this one also, last a bit longer for me if I put down something on my eyes before I put the powder down. The one shade in this palette that I do feel like I've gotten some fallout from is this one down here. And this is really, doesn't have a lot of pigment in it, and I think it's designed to be more of a sparkly topper type shade than some of the others. So I am not sure I'm going to use that all that much anyway, but I probably will be just a little more careful about that one because it does have more fallout. Now, in terms of the actual palette itself, I was kind of under the impression when I saw the photographs of this and the video footage from other people that this was going to be a palette that was actual metal, and I thought that it was probably going to be kind of on the large side and that it was going to be something that I was going to feel like was always in the way. It has turned out to be a lot different than that. For one thing, this is plastic, and on the one hand, that's not a great thing. I would prefer that it not be plastic. But on the other hand, it's very light, and it doesn't take up nearly as much room as I thought it was going to. And as plastic things go, I think that these raised stones that it has on the top of this, I think that's kind of attractive. It does get totally covered with fingerprints, and I am probably never going to clean it. And if I did clean it, it would just get dirty right away. So that is one negative about it. If you want something to be really pretty, then you're going to have to put quite a bit of work into cleaning this because it gets fingerprinted almost immediately. In terms of the size, for instance, this is a Natasha Denona palette that I have recently, and so you can see the size of that compared to the size of this palette. So this is considerably larger, and it's larger than the other Natasha Denona palettes that I have, but I don't feel like it's so large that I feel frustrated with it. So in terms of the availability of this palette, that has been kind of weird so far. So it's just been out for a couple of weeks, and it only has been available that I have seen or heard about on the Byredo website and from a retailer in the UK called Selfridges. And on the Byredo website, it came into stock briefly and then it went out of stock. And then a couple more times it has come back into stock. And I managed to pick it up really fast when it came into stock really briefly, and I'm not sure what's going to be happening now. It does say that if you want to be notified when it comes back into stock that you should put your name down and they will email you, and they did email me a couple of times when it came back into stock, and then I would go on the website and it would be gone, and then I would so that happened a couple times before I managed to snag it. So and it was on Selfridges for a while, and now it's not even on Selfridges at all. But I don't think this is the end of it. I would hope not. I think that what happened last year is that it did come to a variety of retailers, including ones in the US, and they sold out really fast, but at least it was available for a while. So I think that if you're really interested in this product, that it should be around somewhere, I would hope, but you may need to really look for it and keep an eye out for it and then buy it as soon as it comes into stock, if what happened last year is what happens this year. So it would be really weird for this product to come into stock really briefly, sell out immediately, and have that be that. So I'm hoping that's not what's going to happen. It's really kind of a waste for me to have purchased it and to talk about it on this channel if no one can get it. But on the other hand, I do think that I'm going to actually get some personal use out of this. So of the makeup that I buy, a lot of it is stuff that I could do without really easily, and that I'm just trying out for the sake of trying it out for this channel. But I actually do really like this palette. I would be happy to have this regardless of what happens. So now let's talk about the history of MAC Cosmetics and about this new Mob Beauty Lip Liner. So MAC was founded in 1984 in Toronto, and it was founded by a makeup artist named Frank Toscan and his partner, whose name was Frank Angelo. And Frank Toscan was always known as the creative genius behind MAC, and then Frank Angelo was more on the business side. And Frank Toscan's sister was named Julie Toscan, and she had a boyfriend who was Vic Casale. And Vic Casale was a chemistry major at the time when the MAC was founded. And so the two Franks, as they were called, recruited both Julie and Vic Casale to work for MAC, and they persuaded Vic Casale to become a makeup formulator. And so he did that, and all throughout the 1980s and until the very end of the 1990s, he was the chief chemist for MAC, and he was also the head of R&D and quality assurance and really everything to do with the manufacturing of the product. So at some point during this time, Mac sold a minority stake to Estee Lauder, primarily so that they could distribute the product in other countries and prevent counterfeiters from selling fake Mac products in those countries, until the end of the 1990s when Frank Angelo unfortunately died. And at that point, they sold the entire company, including the majority stake to Estee Lauder, and then Frank Toscan and Vic Caselli and Julie Toscan, they all left the company and moved on. And so at that time, Vic Caselli started a company called Cover FX, and he worked there until a couple of years ago, and then he left that company and he started Mob Beauty. So originally MAC was a mission-based company, and they were had their motto as being that they were appropriate for all genders and all skin tones and all ages. And then they also were a bit ahead of their time in terms of their environmental initiatives. And for Mob Beauty, their mission focus is really quite strong as well. And their mission focus is to create products that are not bad for the earth. That seems to be their really driving motivation in terms of things that are going to not be problematic into the future. So they don't include any silicones, they don't include any plastics. And their packaging is also designed to be totally biodegradable and to not create any additional waste. So I have tried all of the products that Mob Beauty makes, and in most cases I've tried multiple shades of all of the products, and I have been really, really impressed with all of it. So for me, it has not had any problems in terms of irritating my skin. I do think the ingredient lists have been really good with regard to that. And it does perform really well for me. In a lot of cases, these products are best in category of any of the products that are on the market. And they also are products that, even though they're supposed, they are clean beauty, they are not having the issues with regard to how long they last that a lot of products are said to, that these are products that have ordinary 12-month, 24-month usage lives, and they have held up perfectly fine for me, and I haven't had any issues with that at all. So I think they're doing a really good job of choosing good ingredients and putting a lot of thoughtfulness into all of the formulas so that they are both good from an ecological standpoint, from a performance standpoint, and from a standpoint of not being irritating. And before I forget, Vic Caselli, that is how he pronounces his last name. I have heard him say that. And he has been working on a variety of different products, and so the newest one that Mob Beauty has created is a line of lip liners. So they will be coming out with a number of different shades, but when he talked to people about the idea for lip liners, then really everybody said to him, can't you bring back that original Mac Spice lip liner? Because I think that it would be really great if we could have it be exactly the same as the original. And he said, well, I don't know. I have to go and find my notebooks. They're back in Canada, and here I am in Southern California. But he did dig out those old notebooks, and it had the formula for the color in it. And he also found a sample of the color and an old stub of a lip pencil. So we did have all of those things as reference. So one thing that he did say is that although he had that original sample, that something like that does oxidize over time, so he had to figure out how much it had oxidized. And with that, in combination with his notes, he was able to create what he believed was the original form. And I actually am fairly convinced that this is actually the original Mac color because of what he has done and because he had those notes and everything, but also because I asked Mob Beauty at one point whether or not Frank Toscan was involved with the company, and they told me that he was an investor in the company and that he has been supportive of them. So he doesn't seem to be working for the company, at least not on a regular basis. What he's mostly working on at present is that he has a line of restaurants in Toronto, which are called Impact Kitchen, and that are designed to have really clean ingredients and to be really healthful. And I really wish that one of those restaurants would open near me, because when I look at that ingredient list and when I read about that particular restaurant, I feel like that's a place that I would probably eat at almost every day and be really happy about it if there were one available. So he's doing some things that are meaningful, but they're not in the area of cosmetics. And I don't know if he would be allowed to work in the area of cosmetics, because one thing that I know is that when Bobbi Brown sold her company to Estee Lauder, she had to sign a 25-year non-compete contract, and so only after the 25 years was up was she able to start Jones Road. So I don't know if Frank Toscan signed a non-compete contract like that, but what I do think is that Vic Caselli is talking with such assurance that this particular color is exactly the same color as the original MAC lip liner, that I would think that if Frank Toscan were not in agreement with that, then probably Vic Caselli wouldn't be doing any of this. And so I feel like if Frank and Vic have looked at this color and now they've showed it to a bunch of other people that were around during the 1990s, and those people all said that they did think that that was the same shade. And they had all the notes and the original samples. I kind of think this is a very, very close match, and probably as close as we're going to get. So if you're interested in this, there's a couple of Instagram posts where Caselli talks about the history of the MAC Spice lip liner. And what he said was that Frank Toscan talked to him about the color in the fall of 1989, and then that it was released to the market in the spring of 1990, and that it became quite popular. And of course, Linda Evangelista was one of the people that would talk about it and was known for making it really popular, and that it was also used throughout the series on Friends, and that they used this on all of the actresses, even though they tended to move towards wearing particular different shades of the MAC lipsticks. And that seemed to be the case, that regardless of what 90s type of lipstick you were wearing, that the Spice lip liner was very, very popular and would go with anything, supposedly. So what Vic Caselli said is that the color for Spice, that it actually got a little bit darker throughout the decade. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I think it might have been that people became more comfortable with brown lipsticks, and so a darker brown lipstick was actually appealing at some point. But then what happened in, I think, around 2005 or so, which was after Vic Caselli and Frank Toscan had already long left the company, is that apparently, from what I've heard, and this is more just like a rumor, they switched to a different lip liner factory. And at that point, they never got the color right after that again. And rather than it being a kind of a cool, neutral color, it became much more orange and much brighter. And if you look at the color of the new Mob Beauty 1990 version and you compare that to the current Spice version, then that is definitely the case. So I think I called the current MAC Spice in my last video as a pumpkin orange, and that's not exactly true. I think I was thinking more of like pumpkin pie with a bit of an orangeness to it, but also some brownishness. But I think it's actually, if I actually compare it to real pumpkin pie in the photograph, I think that it's not quite as orange. It actually is a little bit more pink, but it definitely is leaning towards orange. And if you compare it to the original, it looks really, really orange. So part of the reason that I bring up some of this in more detail is because there is a makeup artist and a makeup collector named Erin Parsons. And a year or two ago, she brought up the fact that she had an old MAC lip liner and that it looked like it was a totally different color than the current MAC Spice lip liner. And so she suggested that it actually was a much different color, and that this is one of the reasons I think that Mob Beauty decided to bring back the original one. So when Mob Beauty came out with their new M1990 version, then she did another video where she compared this version to the pencil that she had, and she said that she thought that the undertone was pretty much identical, but that the older pencil was much darker. And then she said that she wondered if it was because it had gotten more dark over time, or if it was because that they just didn't get the color right. And so what Vic Casale said was that there were two different reasons that the pencil was probably darker, and that the first one was that the pencil that she had was one that was actually released in the later 1990s, which was it was a silver pencil, and so it was associated with the millennium. And by that point, the pencil had already gotten a little bit darker than it was when it was first released, and that in addition, it would have oxidized over time, just as his own pencil had oxidized over time. Now, in terms of the formula for the M1990 pencil, this is a totally different formula than they were using back at MAC. This one is specifically designed not to have any plastics in it. It's designed not to have any silicones in it. And it also comes in a pencil with a metal cap on it. And it does have, I was amazed to find out, some vanilla planifolia in it. So I am not a fan of vanillin, which is artificial vanilla at all, but they managed to put actual real vanilla in this. I'm not tasting a lot of vanilla, but it actually tastes really good to me. It feels really good to me. And I have had some lip liners that have been irritating to my lips, and this one has not been irritating at all. And I think in terms of how it goes on just lovely. It is just slightly creamy, but it goes on really smoothly. It fills in really easily if I want to fill in my lips with it. And it feels really good, and I've been really impressed with it. And what it says on the website about the pencil is that it is supposed to be waterproof, richly pigmented, stay put all day color with no transferring, feathering, or bleeding. Easily achieve a precision line that never skips or drags, and smooth enough to glide and fill your entire lips. And I think that those are all things that are true. I found that to be absolutely true. And when I've tried this on, swatched on my hand in comparison to some other lip liners that are on the market, I do feel like this one lasts better than many of them, and at least as well as all of them in terms of being difficult to remove unless I'm actually using makeup remover oil. And so Alicia Gallagher, who is the co-founder of Mob Beauty, has been talking on their Instagram page about some new shades of this lip liner. So the next one that is coming and already in production is a dark brown shade with a little bit of plum in it, apparently. And next they are working on a shade that's going to be kind of a grayish type of a color, so a grayish beige. But if you want to know what the M1990 color looks like before you buy it, or you want to know if you don't need to buy it because you already have something that's that color, then I have some swatches and I can tell you which ones are the closest in my opinion. So if we start first with MAC, obviously the current MAC Spice is not similar, really, in my opinion, at all to the M1990 pencil. And I went to Ulta and I looked at some of the pencils, and I think that Counterculture is really just like Spice. It's just a little bit lighter. The one that's the closest that I can find, and the one that people tend to bring up as being the closest to the original, is called Whirl. And I think that one is still quite a bit different. It has a bit more of a burgundy type of a color. So what we have here, we have M1990 at the top, then we have Whirl, and then we have Spice. And I think that it's a lot closer, but it's still not really the same shade, and it comes across a lot darker on my lips when I wear it. So next I have a bunch of different lip liners that I thought were the closest and that I thought would be worth comparing. And the one that I think is almost bang on being exactly the same is one from Jane Iredale, and it is called, wouldn't you know, Spice. So they actually got this right, and it has certainly been a popular lip liner for Jane Iredale. I think that is their most popular color, and people do talk about it and say that they buy it all the time. And I don't think that one is a waterproof formula. I think it's worked fine for me, but I'm not real demanding. And I think that it is a nice pencil in terms of not irritating my lips. Now, what I will say is that the pencil that I have is in this black packaging. And the one that they're making now is in a white packaging. And I don't get any sense that either the formula or the color has changed. And I did do some reading of user reviews, and people don't seem to be complaining that it's a different color. So I'm hoping that it's the same. And at some point I'm going to be going to a Blue Mercury store where they stock Jane Iredale, and so I will compare it then. But I think that in terms of the lip liners that are on the market, that this is the one that I think is the closest. Another lip liner that I think is pretty close is the one from Jones Road, and I have that in the color mauve, and that does look like, of the colors that they're offering, that this is the one that's likely to be the closest. And Bobbi Brown was around in the 1990s, and she made her name by creating pinky brown lipsticks that were the color of lips. I think that was in 1990. And so the idea that she would be able to get this color bang on right and have that be an option in terms of the lip liners that she's offering, that's not a big surprise either, I guess. Now, the issue that I have with this pencil is that it does irritate my lips. Jones Road has a habit of putting a lot of preservatives in everything that they sell. Now, they don't use parabens, obviously, but they do use a lot of more natural type of ingredients that do preserve the life a lot. So in this case, they put benzyl alcohol in it, which is a preservative. And I think this has a 36-month usage life, which is sort of unnecessarily long. And this does irritate my lips, so I don't use these. But in terms of the colors, I think this is a pretty good match as well. And then the other product on this page that I think is the closest is the one from House Labs. And this is in a shade called Maple Matte. And I have actually really liked this shade, and I have worn it quite frequently. And now I kind of understand why, because it is very, very close to this lip liner shade. And I think it is very wearable for me. And then the other shades that I have on this page, the one from Charlotte Tilbury, the Pillow Talk one, that one is actually much more pink. The cheekbone one, I think that is a nice pencil, but it's considerably pinker. And then the one that is from Skin by Kim, they have a whole bunch of different pencil colors, and I purposely picked out one that I thought was the most pink, and it still is much, much more brown than the M1990 shade. And then Chantekind Wants, and I feel like that one actually does have a similar undertone to the M1990, but it is somewhat of a lighter color. And then the next page here, I have a bunch of other lip liners that I think are in the same ballpark, but they are less good matches. And then for lipsticks, I am certainly not saying that you can't wear this M1990 shade unless you have a matching lipstick. But if you happen to have any of these lipsticks, then that might give you a better idea of what this 1990 shade is. So I picked out a few lipstick shades that I think a lot of people have seen and so might be familiar with. Merit is a company that seems to be really interested in thinking back to the 1990s, so they have a lot of products that have that sort of a vibe to them. And I think that of their lipsticks, the Slip one, that one is the closest. I think it's actually quite similar. And I've always felt like this is a lipstick that I was actually able to wear, even though it seemed like it was neutral, that there was just that tiny bit of hint of pink in it that made it really wearable for me, and I think that that's because it's really this color. They make a shade that is called 1990, but that is considerably more brown, much more brown than this color. So Merit Baby, that one's much pinker, and the Merit Equestrian one, that one is fairly close to the M1990 in terms of the undertone, but of course that is a matte lipstick, so it comes off as being much darker. And then another makeup artist who was around during the 1990s is Lisa Eldridge, and she talked about when she created the lipstick shade Meet Me in Berlin, that it was associated with a photo shoot that was in East Berlin back in the days when it was still really kind of raw and kind of grungy. And I think that that's a very close shade. So I think she did get that shade right, which is not a surprise. Lisa Eldridge is so good with color. And then I picked out a couple of other colors, including the Charlotte Tilbury Nude Romance, which is very popular, and Kosas Vegas. And I think those are both pretty warm. They're not quite as warm as the current MAC Spice, but they are much, much more orange. So on the next page, I have a few more lip products that I think are fairly close to the M1990. And the one from Beauty, that one is called M3. And this is a cream lipstick, and it is described as either a nude blush beige or a nude caramel pink. And I think that this is really almost exactly the same color as that lip liner. And so that is what I have been wearing throughout this video. And I think that this is actually a really nice color, and I think it is one that I have already worn a lot. And now that I have this lip liner to go with it, I think I will be wearing it even more. I think that in terms of a lip look for me that is much more neutral than what I usually wear, but that looks really comfortable and really pretty and doesn't give me a sort of a concealer lips type of a look, I think this works really, really well for me. So I really do like this shade very much. Another product that I see myself wearing very, very frequently in combination with this lip liner is this shade in the Isamaya Lip Balm, and this is called Follower, so this is a sort of a brownie color, and I think when I put this over the lip pencil, I think that that looks really, really nice together. And this is really my favorite lip balm of all, and I think that it's performed really, really well, and the way that I really like to wear it is over a lip pencil. So Jones Road has a line of lip tints that are like really lightweight, easygoing lipsticks, and I really do like the formula for those. But when she first brought them out, they were all quite bright colors, and people said to her, you know, can you just please bring out some that are more nude, like the original lipsticks that you brought out in the 1990s. And so one of the colors that she brought out was nude mauve. And when I look at that color, it is very, very similar to this lip liner and to this M3 color from Beauty. And then another color that I think the undertone is very close is the Lisa Eldridge Gloss in Sorcery. And then there's a couple more lip products here that I don't think are very close. And now let's move to blush and bronzer. And one that I think is really, really close to this lip liner is the Westman Atelier Baby Cheeks blush stick in the color Mimi. So this is much more muted than most blush that you will find. It has a bit of a beigeish grayishness to it. And I have found that I personally have worn that blush a lot, and that is what I am wearing today in terms of blush, and I think it has worked really, really well for me. And then what I realized is that Jones Road makes a bronzer shade, which is called Dusty Rose, and people, you know, always have said, how can that be a bronzer? It is pink. But of course, when people with light skin go into the sun, that their skin does tend to get a little bit pink, even if they're not really burned. And so that is kind of what this particular shade is simulating, and I don't use it really generously as a bronzer. I tend to use it more as kind of a blush type of a color. And I think that that is almost exactly the same as the Westman Atelier Mimi, and it is pretty much exactly the same as the M1990. So I put some of that on as well today. And then Ma Beauty makes a couple of products that are also in the ballpark for this. So one of these is their powder bronzer, which is not quite as pink as that Jones Road bronzer, but it is still leaning a little bit on that pinkish mauvish type of a side. And then they also have a cream version of that. And I do like wearing both of those products on my skin. And then they also have a blush, and the blush is called M72. It is described as a natural rosy tan, and I do think that it comes across as being a fairly similar to the lip liner. It's a little bit brighter, but if I really blend it into my cheeks, it comes across as pretty much that same shade, and I think that's very pretty. I actually liked it so much that I made a mistake, and I bought two of them because I can never remember what those color numbers are. So I really wish that Ma Beauty would have like a contest, and that they invited people to name those shades, and then they picked the winners. And so those of us who are memory challenged in terms of not being able to remember numbers would be able to have something else to hang our hats on in terms of knowing what products we're buying. That would be a real help for me anyway. And then finally, what I thought I would do is just insert some footage of me putting on the makeup look that I have been wearing today. So I started off by putting on the Mob Beauty foundation. It's a cream foundation, and I have been using that as a concealer on my face. And I have two shades in that. One of those is P30, which is a pinker shade and a little bit darker, and I have been using that under my eyes to give myself some mild color correcting in addition to concealing. And then the other that I have is in the shade M20, and that is a more of a neutral shade, and I use that in other areas of my face where I see some redness. And this is a product that I really do like. I do not find that it settles into my wrinkles, and it does give some good coverage, and it feels good on my skin, and it hasn't been irritating, and it's not too expensive. And then for my brow products, back in the 1990s, I had eyebrows that were really pretty much considered to be the ideal without my doing anything to them at all. They're fairly small, and I never plucked them at all. And over the years, my brows have gotten much, much more sparse and lighter. And these days, brows are supposed to be bushier, and so I find that I do spend quite a bit of time kind of fighting with my brows in order to make them look a lot more dark and a lot more noticeable than they actually are. But for this look, I just tried to bring them back to the 1990s look by just having there be a fairly thin line and darkening them a little bit. And I think that that is a lot easier than trying to make them look a lot thicker than they ever were. And for this, I just used the Jones Road Brow Pencil in the shade Ash, which is a little bit of a more of a neutral shade that seems to go better with my graying hair. This pencil has little fibers in it, and so this is the one pencil that I use on its own because in addition to coloring in my brows, it also gives my brows a little bit of texture. And then I put on some setting powder in order to increase the matte finish because that definitely was a 1990s characteristic of attractive makeup. And for that I used the Mob Beauty powder. I really like this powder formula, and now it is available in a pink shade, and I like that even more than the original shade. So next let's talk about the Say Slip Tint Concealer. What I mostly have been using it for as an eyelid primer in order to cover over the darkness on my eyes and also to give my eyeshadow a little bit of a base to have something to stick to a little bit better. And there aren't that many different concealers that I have been able to use for that purpose because many of them do irritate my sensitive eyelids, but I think that this one has been fine. And then in terms of the Byredo Mineralscapes palette, I am just putting on one color on my eyelids, and I've been really drawn towards blue eyeshadows recently. So in this palette, I pulled out this blue eyeshadow color it called Grounding Skies. So it's kind of a blue-gray and it has a little bit of a sheen to it, and I think it is pretty, and it kind of matched the shirt that I was wearing today. So for this eyeshadow, I just put a little bit on the movable part of my eyelids, but then I carried it up a little bit higher than that so that especially with my hooded lids, you could still see the color, and it would make my eyes look a little bit larger. And then this palette also has some additional dark blue shades in it, so I thought that I would use one of those as an eyeliner. So the one that's called Lunar Rhythm, that one is more like a dark navy type of a blue with a little bit of a shimmer in it. And there was a moment during the 1990s when people would put a lot of smudgy eyeliner on top of the eyes and then also underneath the eyes as an eyeliner. And I'm remembering especially Princess Diana and her BBC interview, and that she had a lot of smudgy eyeliner under her eyes. And I never really wore my eyeliner that dramatically, but I decided to put on a little bit in this look, just kind of a remembrance of that. And I certainly think that during the 1990s that blush was really understated, much more so than it was back in the 1980s. And so I am using two shades in this look that I think are the most close to the M1990 Lip Liner. And one of those is the Jones Road Bronzer in the shade Dusty Rose. And then I also am using some of the Westmont Atelier Blush Stick in the shade Mimi. And then I put on the Mob M1990 Lip Liner. And then over the top of that, I put on some of the Mob M3 Cream Lipstick. That is a pink caramel shade, and it is basically the same color as the lip liner. Now, there's not really any reason why the lipstick needs to match the lip liner, and I think probably in most cases people were wearing shades that were considerably darker. I'm kind of interested now in the 1990s lipstick shades also. So the one that I used to wear toward the millennium, it was Mac Twig. But I was also reading that on Friends, Rachel usually wore a shade that was called Paramount, which is still available. And Monica wore a shade that was called Spice It Up. So I'm a little bit interested in looking up those shades now, and not necessarily wearing MAC lipsticks, but seeing if there's any other formulas out there that have similar shades, and trying those on to see how they work for me. And in any case, I'm thinking about this particular look that I put together is actually feeling really familiar to me. And I do feel like it's feeling fairly comfortable to me, and it's also a little bit comforting. So I'm kind of inclined to lean into it a little bit more and to try out a few more looks going forward. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of the video, and please let me know in the comments how you feel about these particular two products, and if you have any interest in them, or if you have any interest in 1990s makeup in general. I feel like I'm really interested in that right now, and I'm feeling really comfortable with it, but that doesn't mean that anybody else is. And in addition, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then I hope you will go ahead and do that. And Coco and I love you very much. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye. People want to see the little dog. Okay. Now we go out for a walk.